Hello everyone, my name is Andrey. Today we'll continue working with our Findev exchange, and today we'll finish our user configuration. So let's start. So in the last video we started working on our first API users and we managed to get through all of the schemas and models. Now let's talk about the next thing in their documentation, which is called authentication backends and user managers. So that video is gonna sum up all of the configuration that we required to do in order to get our users working. So, in the one of my previous videos, I talked about the ways of authentication in the web, and we talked about GVT and sessions as the two main ways of authenticating your users. We talked about different pluses and drawbacks of each method, and that video was made because we want to pick the best way of authenticating our users for our project. So, for now, let's go to Fast API users documentation, and here you can see in the authentication backends introduction section, you can see transport plus strategy equals authentication backend. So what does it mean? Transport is how you transfer your authentication. So in our case, we have two methods, bearer or cookie. We can write our own, but I think we'll just use cookie for now, because as I explained, with bearer, there is one major drawback, which is described here. There is a need to store your token manually. So we'll need to store our token manually, and as I said, if I'm talking about web, about web apps, then we know that if we store our token manually, then probably it's going to be in the local storage. Of course, we can store it in the memory and just like a JavaScript variable, but typically it's going to be a local storage, and local storage is XSS vulnerable, so we can access local storage from our JavaScript. Because of that, we don't want that. We don't want our bearer token. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, then you can watch one of my previous videos. It's gonna pop up somewhere here. So we're gonna go with cookies, because cookies are automatically stored. We don't need to do anything in the front-end application. They are automatically removed, so we can have expiration time. We can have tons of settings. And aside from that, CSRF protection is not a problem for us, because we're gonna have that protection in the project by default, and it's harder to work with them outside the browser, like a mobile app or a server. So that is true, because if we're talking about a mobile app, maybe your mobile app will not have cookies inside of it, maybe, or a server. What do they mean by a server? Imagine that you have your financial exchange, as we do in our case, and you want to expose a public API for your users. For example, Binance Exchange has a public API for the users. So what you can do is write your own bot, write your own program that will somehow interact with the Binance Exchange. You can do that, and I think server is meant by a separate application that interacts with your program. But that's not going to be a problem, because if you're talking about mobile apps, then, well, honestly, I have no idea about mobile development, but I'm pretty sure that we can arrange it with cookies and authentication with that, but right now we're only talking about browsers, and I don't think that we'll create a mobile app in the future, because I personally have never done a production-grade mobile app. I always had someone do it for me. And when we're talking about a server, so if we want to expose an API for other users, for example, you can write a bot and work with my exchange. Then we're going to talk about a separate authentication method, like an API key. And that API key will probably be sent with every request. So for example, Binance as an instance has API key and API secret. So we need to send both of those tokens with each request to the Binance servers. And that's the only way to authenticate using the API, or using sessions in Binance, so they store those sessions in the cookies, as we will do it as well. Alright, so the first thing is transport, how we transfer our tokens. Let's open up that cookie page here, and the only code that we need from here is that configuration. Let's copy it, and I'm going to go to my exchange, and inside of the API I'm going to create a new module called users, and inside of users I'm going to create a new module called auth, so authentication. Here I'm going to create transports, like that, and I'm going to just paste that cookie transport in here. So basically what I'm saying is that we have inside of our API root directory, we're going to have users and authentication, because in the previous video we worked with database users. However, authentication itself is not related to the database directly, because authentication in Fast API users is more like how we transfer our tokens and how we store them. And it may be related to the database, but we're not going to have any import which are directly related to our data storage in our transports or in our strategy today. So we're going to talk about strategies right now. But first of all, let's finish with our transports, and that whole speech was for you to understand that we don't need to put our authentication with transports and methods of, so we don't need to put our authentication methods inside of the database, because those things are not related. We can have different methods of authenticating our users, but we can have the same schema in our data storage for doing that. So that's why I put my transport inside of the API directory, of course, in users and auth, in order for us to arrange it more clearly. All right, and here we have cookie transport. I don't want to expose a variable itself because I don't know, I just don't want to expose a variable like that. So just a cookie transport, and then we'll import it from somewhere. What I want to do instead is create a function called get transport. And we're just going to return our cookie transport like that. Very, very simple. Of course, instead of the 3600, we're just going to put settings dot, let's import settings, and we're going to put settings dot user, how do we call that variable? User auth max age. Probably like that, yeah. User auth max age. Pretty good name. So I'm just gonna put a variable inside of my settings. I did it before, and I'm pretty sure you know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I'm gonna go to my env, and here max age as 3600 seconds, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, seconds. Of course, in cookie transport, we have different options like cookie name, cookie max age, cookie path, cookie domain, cookie secure, and cookie HTTP only. And of course, same site. So those are the default settings for our cookies. And if I'm gonna open up my developer console and go to the application, here we have cookies, and you can see all of those. Like here you have path, here you have domain, path, name, expiration. So expiration is our max age that we set just now. Size of the cookie, well, size is calculated because of the data that you store inside HTTP only, and of course secure, same site, and so on and so forth. For us, the only settings that are very important right now are secure, HTTP only, and maybe in the future same site. Of course, other settings are very important as well, and we're going to change them in the future. But for now, domain, no, sorry, not domain, but secure and HTTP only are the only settings, the only configuration variables that we need to adjust. Because cookie secure only allows you to send your cookies with HTTPS, so with SSL requests. So all your cookies must be not encoded, but must be, I forgot the word. So you can only use SSL and connection which is secured. I'm sorry, I forgot the word on. You don't encode, but you protect your information with different algorithms. I think you know what I mean, but I forgot the word for that. Yeah. Oh, cryptography. Yeah, you need to encrypt. You need to encrypt your cookies, and only if you do that, only if you encrypt all of your requests, your cookies can be sent. And that's very important, because if you're talking about authentication or any sort of request in the web in 2022, if we use HTTP, so unsecured connection, in order to send cookies, some hackers, some men in the middle can intercept those, and we don't want that. So that is why cookie secure should be true, and it's true by default. HTTP only is another major configuration variable that should be true by default, and it is. It's used in order to prevent access from the JavaScript. And as I said, if you're talking about, for example, bearer tokens, or if you're talking about local storage that will allow you to store your tokens, store your secure variables inside of your JavaScript application, then you expose yourself to a major vulnerability, which is called XSS. I have a separate video on XSS attacks, you can watch it right now, but what does it mean is that some people can access your tokens from the JavaScript. And we don't want that, because in that case, they can just send a request to another website and get the token that they wish. So we don't want that, and because of that, HTTP only should be true. So we can't access our cookies from the JavaScript, and we can't transfer them using unsecured connections. Pretty simple. Cookie same site lags should, or strict or lags, major two settings should be also turned on, but not for now. We're gonna go to that in the future, but for now, secure and HTTP only are the only two settings that we need. Alright, so we are done with that. Let's go back to introduction. And so we return our cookie transport with getTransport function, and I think we're done with that file for today. The next thing is strategy. So strategy is how you, strategy is how you actually store your tokens. So transport is how you transfer them, strategy is how you store them. And here we have transport plus strategy is authentication backend. Authentication backend basically combines two of those things and allows us to authenticate our users. Pretty simple. So we are done with the transport. Now let's go to the strategy. And in terms of strategies, we have three major ones: GVT, JSON or JavaScript, JSON Web Token. Here we have a JSON Web Token, database, and Redis. So the most secure ones are database and Redis. So you can see all of the pluses and minuses of those methods, but I'm going to tell you myself. So I'm going to tell you what I think about those methods. So we're going to use GVT for now, just for now, because whenever we are going to start our application, or when we're going to start our application, we're going to need a more secure way of transmitting our authentication information. So GVT is relatively nice. Of course, if we store it in cookies, we can authenticate our users, but not for the financial exchange. We're only going to use GVT in order to test out our application. So GVT is only for tests, and I think a lot of people know how to authenticate using GVT. But the only problem with GVT, that is the major problem for us, is that it can be invalidated. Of course, aside from the other problems that I talked about in the previous video that you probably watched already. Okay, then we have database. So as I said, we're going to use GVT for now, and I'm going to set up it today. Database. What's the problem with the database? Well, the only problem is that we're going to have to deal with our main database as the storage for our tokens, and I don't really like that idea. Why is that? Because whenever we talk about database, I think of it as storage for the data that we are going to need in the future. So maybe not. Maybe we're going to delete some of the data. It's alright. But with tokens, token is just kind of like a thing that can expire anytime, and you can create a new token in order to authenticate your user. And the biggest problem with the database is that we're going to have to invalidate our tokens. We're going to have to store them in the primary data storage, and I don't like that, because imagine all of the requests that come to our database. So if we have a server that has, for example, a Postgres database inside of it, we're going to have to send 2 times more requests to the database, because we're going to store both tokens and all the other information in it. And I don't really want that. Of course, it's secure, it's cool, maybe not performant. It depends on the application, because if you have millions of users and all of them go to your database for every request, and typically when we're talking about user authentication, we have some kind of a middleware that allows us to filter out the users that are not authenticated and redirect them to the pages that require authentication or something like that, or that allow them to authenticate. And the performance may not be the plus of that method. But Redis, on the other hand, is a perfect candidate for us. So Redis is the third authentication strategy that we can use. And Redis is basically a key value storage. I have a series on videos of me working with Redis, and the only problem with Redis is that we need to set up another server that has Redis on it. So yeah, that's basically the only problem. And I don't want to do that for now, because I want to keep that project as simple as possible. Just for now. Because maybe in the future we're going to use Redis as, maybe as a temporary storage. Probably not, because we're going to have some other tools that will allow us to do that. But If you're gonna use Redis, then of course we're gonna switch to our strategy that uses Redis, because the only problem is that a Redis server is needed. So we need to maintain a separate program, separate group of servers, and I don't want to do that right now. Of course, you can run your Redis server in a Docker, but if we're talking about deployment and production, and I'm gonna do like a test of deployment, so I'm not gonna, of course, deploy my exchange to work on its own, so to work like Binance, but I'm gonna do a deployment just for you, so you can just see how that exchange works. You can just interact with it and so on. So Redis is another technology, and in production you're gonna have a separate server for the Redis, probably separate server, and yeah, so that is the only problem. Alright, but we are gonna go with GVT for now. Let's go to GVT, and here we have all the configuration things that we need. Of course, we can have our public key, private key that are gonna be in our GVT strategy, but for now, let's just copy that first bit of our configuration code. And inside of auth, I'm gonna create another file called strategies, because we name all the files in plural. And let's just copy it in here, delete those spaces, and let's delete our secret, because secret should be a secret. And as I said in the previous video, secret is the only thing that keeps your GVT secure. Because if we're gonna go to gvt.io, here we can see that so gvt.io, yeah, here you can see that you have your secret, and if I know your secret as a hacker, then I can forge any GVT that I want. So the only thing that I need to do in order to create my own GVT and access some protected resources on your code is know all the information from payload and know your secret key. And secret key should not be stored in your code just like that. So just like secret equals to secret. Of course, it's an example, but we're talking about a real exchange, which is probably going to be secure. And because of that, I'm going to create settings. I'm going to import settings and create a new variable inside of those, which is called, how do we call it? User auth secret. Pretty good name. Let's go here. Let's paste it, and user auth secret here. I'm gonna go to env, and instead of writing a bunch of information, I'm gonna go to a website which is called dgserity Django secret key.ir. That website allows us to generate secret keys for Django, but I always use it in order to just create secret keys for my project. Of course, we need to put it as a string like that, and let's just copy it as the value of a variable for now and close the file. Alright, so that is the only thing that we need for now. Secret and lifetime seconds. Yeah, I almost forgot about that. Lifetime seconds. For now, we can set up lifetime seconds as our user auth max age. So the same thing that we are using inside of our get transport. And I think we're done with the strategies for now. Let's just take a look at here. Let's rename our function to be get strategy. Just like that. And pretty simple. So let's go to create a backend. Because as I said, we have our transports and we have our strategies, but they don't work separately from each other. We need to fuse them together in order to create our backend. And here is our backend. So authentication backend, let's copy it, and let's create a new file here called backends. I'm gonna copy it here, and basically authentication backend is the only thing that you're gonna need to expose to your API. So we're not gonna import our strategies or transports directly. We're only gonna work with the backend itself. And here we have three things that we need to set up. First of all, we have our transport, and let's go with get transport here. I'm gonna call that function, and aside from that, we're gonna have our get GVT strategy renamed to get strategy when imported as well. So for transport, you need to call that function because our authentication backend waits for the object, but for strategy, you just need to provide the link to the function that will return your strategy. So link here and the object here. Alright, so we have three settings here. Transport and get strategy are obvious ones, and the other one is called name. So name basically tells you what is the name of your authentication backend. It should be unique, and why do we need to use it? Because in one project we can have different authentication backends. So imagine that you are going to have a backend that allows you to log in with your Google account. You have a backend which allows you to log in with your email and password. You have your backend which allows you to log in with your I don't know, with your fingerprints or something like that. Of course, it's not how that works, and it's mainly for the application itself, so for the developers, because our users will not see GVT anywhere. But authentication backend and that name is really important. So name should be unique, and we're gonna just say GVT for now. I'm not gonna expose it as an environment variable because yeah, it's just gonna be a GVT. All right, so we created our backends. And now let's go to the user manager. So user manager is a class that will allow you to fuse that all together. So that user manager class is going to be used in order to use our user DB, user create schemas, our models, and all the stuff that we wrote in the previous video. So let's just copy it all from here, and let's just go to the users, and I'm going to create a new file called managers. Here I'm going to paste all of my stuff, and instead of db get user db, I'm going to say adapters get user adapter. Models is going to be named to schemas, renamed to schemas, and user create user db are gonna work fine. Instead of secret, we're going to use our, as you can see, secret is used in reset password token secret and verification token secret. So what I'm suggesting is create a new variable, copy that, paste it here, rename it to the uppercase, then go to settings, create two separate variables in the uppercase as well, and env from those variables. So we basically move them to the environment variables for now. And for the development purposes, we can have the same user authentication secret, user reset password token secret, and verification secret. And also let's add user prefix to all of those. So user, just like that. Let's go to settings, here, here, and here. User reset password token. Yeah, it works here. Let's add it inside of here and inside of here. All right, so I basically exposed those variables to the environment variable, to the environment variables file, and then we use them as normal Python variables inside of our user manager. So reset password token secret is used in order to create it is basically used in order to create a token for you to reset your password, and verification in order to verify your account. Let's remove all of those functions because their main purpose is to do something after an event occurred. So on after register, after we registered our user, on after forgot password, after we press forget our password, and request verify, all that we don't need it for now. So we don't need it. Let's delete it. Maybe we're gonna use it in the somewhere in the future, but not now. And get user manager function, I don't think that it should be here. So let's copy it but remove it. So get user adapter can be removed as well, and face API can be removed as well. So why did I remove that get user manager function from here? Because we're working in a database directory, and we have not yet exposed Fast API module, Fast API framework, Fast API library to the database module. So if you look through all of my files, you will not find any from Fast API import something, because Fast API should not be directly tied to your database. That's why in the previous video I said that it's a really big turn for our project that we use Fast API users, because basically those are used directly with the Fast API. However, until now, we have not yet exposed any direct dependency to the Fast API in our database directory. We have only done so in the API here and maybe somewhere here in the auth. And that's very important because I don't want to expose Fast API in my database, because that's not how it works. You have a web view layer and you have a database layer, so persistence layer. And that where persistence where should not be directly tied to your web view where, because otherwise you don't have any structure in your code. That is why I copied that get user manager function from here, and I will put it somewhere in my user's new file, which is called API. Just like that, get user manager. Here inside of my API, we can import all of the things without any problems. Get user adapter instead of my get user adapter instead of my get user DB, because as we wrote it in the previous video, get user adapter is just a function that returns today's user database to our project. Alright, so user manager is a class that we can import directly, but I suggest creating a function called get user manager, or let's call it create user manager, just like that, and it's gonna just return the class itself, user manager. Alright, so inside of the users API, let's from database users managers, let's import our create user manager. Let's create an object here, so user manager is going to be create user manager. I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do right now, so to expose the function instead of the object itself. Yeah, maybe that's not the... Yeah, let's just expose the object. I don't want to... Let's just use it just like that. So from API, I'm not going to import create user manager, I'm just going to import user manager directly. Alright, and now we have get user manager inside of our API file. Everything works, everything is fine. However, we need to go to routers and add our last object, which is called fast API users. So fast API users object is directly used in order to tie it all together and create our routes for our users to interact with. So let's just copy it from here. Let's paste it to our API here, and I'm gonna move the import to the second line. Alright, so fast API users is an object that is used directly to tie it all together. As you can see, we use all of the schemas here, so user create, user update, user TP, all of that. And auth backends are also used here. So as I said, we're not going to use strategies or transports directly, we're only going to use our backends. And as you can see, we use a list of backends. So it's a list. And that's very important because, as I previously mentioned, we can have different backends in one application, so different auth backends. And that is why I'm going to create a new function called get auth backends plural, because we're going to return a list of all of the backends. For now, we only have our auth backend, but we're going to have different classes in the future. So get auth backends. Let's go to our api.py, get auth backends. Let's import it. And yeah, kind of like that. So now we have our fast API users in here. And the only thing that I want to do in addition is create our auth router. So in fast API, let's go to api.py, and I'm going to explain that concept really quickly. In fast API, we don't have programs that just use app directly. So in the first video of that series, we used .app or add app directly in order to create a route. So route that our users can interact with. So basically a URL. However, in fast APIs, we don't want to do that because we want to group our routes logically. So for example, you're going to have users, you're going to have products. It's a really great thing to group your users and separate them from your products logically. And that is why we're not going to use app directly. Instead of that, we're going to use a router. So a router, let me import it from the fast API. It's called API router. It's basically a class that you can create, API router, and then say API router.get, put everything that you would put in the arguments with normal app.get, but that router is going to be included in the application afterwards. So we're going to have user router, then we're going to have order router or orders router, and different routers will allow us to use different settings for and group our routes logically. So if I'm going to go inside of my API router and press Ctrl P on my keyboard, you're gonna see that we have prefix, so the prefix before our route, then you're gonna have tags, dependencies, default response class, responses, callbacks, a lot of stuff. And those routers really allow us to extend FAST API even more. So as I said, we're not gonna use our app directly in order to create views. We're gonna use routers as we do it in Django. So in Django, you basically have include if you work with Django, and it's basically the same thing. So we use just routers in order to work with our application. So what I'm gonna do now is create a new function called define get auth routers, just like that. And why do I need to create a function? I can import FAST API users directly here, and I'm probably gonna do that. But for auth routers, we're gonna create a function. So why that? Because as I said, we can have different auth backends, and therefore we can have different auth routers. So if we are gonna look at the example here, we're gonna have app.include router. So we are adding those routes from our router inside of our application. But as you can see, FAST API uses get auth router function, so returns our router for user authentication, and it has auth backend as an argument. So auth backend is like what auth backend you want to use for that router. We can have different auth backends, as I said, and what I'm gonna do inside of my get auth routers here is I'm gonna iterate through all of my backends and create prefixes for those backends. So basically, we're not gonna have to call that function app include router for auth backend number 1, for API auth backend, for Google auth backend, for Facebook auth backend, and for all of the other backends that we're gonna create in the future. The only thing that we're gonna do is call the function get auth backends and call the function get auth routers. So if you don't know what I mean, you'll understand that in a minute. So for each router, inside of get auth backends, I'm gonna iterate through each router inside of my auth backends, and what I'm gonna do here is, before that I need to create routers as a dictionary here and say routers from auth backend, or from auth backend, it's not a router here, from auth backend, just like that. So routers from auth backend dot name equals FAST API get auth router from auth backend, just like that. So what are we doing here? We're saying, and sorry, we can do it like that. Give me a minute. I thought of a better way of representing it. Just like that, just like that, just like that, and then return it. All right, so that function is ready, and let me just quickly explain what I mean by all of that. Get auth routers is going to be a function which is going to be included in the API. So app.include router, and let's for each auth router in get auth routers, let's import that, and let's for each auth router included. So I'm gonna say router equals auth router from router key, and the prefix is gonna be an f string of slash and auth router from prefix, just like that. And need to put those in here, just like that, and switch it to that at the end. All right, so what I did here, for each router that we import from our get auth routers, so for each router that we return from our get auth router function, we are going to include it inside of our application. And what we are doing here is we're basically saying include the router that is going to be on the router key, and for the prefix use auth router from, not prefix by name, use auth router with that specific prefix. So prefix is basically a prefix before all of your URLs, all of your routes. And what we're saying here is use that prefix, so slash, then the name of our router, that is going to be on the name key inside of our router, which returned from get auth routers function inside of our users API. And here, inside of our get auth routers, we are having get auth backends that returns all of the backends, and each backend has a name. And as I said, that name should be unique. We have that name as JVT. And if we think about that, for each router we append a name or a dictionary with a name, which is auth backend.name, and the router, which is a router for that specific backend. So basically what we're gonna have is routers with their names and the objects that represents the routers themselves. So that is the way to go. Now, if I want to add another router, the only thing that I need to do is go to my backends, or sorry, if I want to add another backend, the only thing that I need to do is go here, add another router, and add it to get auth backends. And that's it. I don't need to change anything inside of the API, anything inside of users API, because all of my backends are going to be included automatically. Whew, that is the whole video. Hope you liked it. Now let's try running our application. And settings has no attribute reset password token. Yes, that's strange because we need to add user here. I forgot to do that. So user prefix before we can't establish connection to database Findev DB eng. Well, I had that error for my Russian project. So yeah, maybe that's the problem. Alright, but I'm gonna solve it for both of Russian and English versions and come up with a solution in the next video. Because for now, I'm pretty tired from all the talking and all the coding, and thank you for watching. My name is Andrew, subscribe to my channel, leave a like, leave a comment, and bye bye.